Happy Bikin' Release Day, Epic 7 fam. Pat here with another how to play video, and in this one, we'll be talking about the Defrosting Ice Queen of Aachen herself, Cerise. As with all of my Epic 7 how to play videos, I'll be going super in depth and trying to cover almost everything you could want to know about the character, including things like her stats, her skills, some possible endgame equipment builds for you to try out, as well as some World Arena knowledge such as teammates to pair her with, and general matchup knowledge. With the introduction out of the way, let's move right on to Cerise's stats. Cerise is an Ice Ranger of the Aquarius zodiac symbol. Her stat line is unique to her. Taking a closer look at her stats, she has 970 attack, 5,299 health, 122 speed, 603 defense, 27% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no base effectiveness or effect resistance. The highlights of this stat line are threefold. 1. The high base speed. Cerise is one of the fastest characters in all of Epic 7. The high base defense, at least for a ranger. This gives her quite a bit of resiliency, especially for a character that moves as fast as she does. And the high base critical hit chance, which allows you to perform a damage dealing role or build if you so choose. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skills section, in the English dub of Epic 7, Cerise is voiced by Jeremy Lee, who we talked about in the Lionheart Sirmia First Thoughts and Initial Impressions video. She is the only person in the English dub of Epic 7 to voice a character for each element. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, however, Cerise is voiced by Taichi Yo, who you can hear as Setsuka from Soul Calibur 6, as well as Iskandar's Faker, Hephaestion from the Fate franchise. Cerise's S1 is Mystical Arrow. It has a 1x attack multiplier. It increases her combat readiness by 10 to 15%, depending on Molagora. Additionally, if her S3 Froststorm is on cooldown, it will also perform a dual attack with a random ally. The power of this S1 really can't be understated. Yes, it has an average attack multiplier, but it allows a very fast character to cycle their turns even faster. And on top of that, the extra dual attack that it has on it allows even her off turns when she doesn't have her S2 or S3 available to be incredibly impactful. One of the strongest changes that this character received in her last round of buffs. Cerise's S2 is Luminous Explosion. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 3 to 4 turn cooldown depending on Molagora. It has a 1.5x attack multiplier. It has a 100% chance to stun the target for 1 turn, as well as a 100% chance to give 2 turn unbuffable to the target. On top of that, it increases Cerise's combat readiness by 50%. Again, a very powerful move. The 50% combat readiness allows an already blazing fast character to take even more turns. So even when this character is not using her ult, all of her moves essentially power her through and allow her to get her ult back even faster. And then that's before we talk about the fact that this is one of the best control skills in the entire game. If Cerise goes first and the enemy does not have immunity on their team, you can use Luminous Explosion right off the bat and essentially make it so that their first turn is a complete dud. And with that extra combat readiness, again, you will get another turn very, very quickly, which allows you to use the S3 or the S1 if you so choose. This move also has arguably the 2 most useful debuffs in the entire game. Stun is game changing because it essentially denies someone an entire turn. They have 0 game impact when you stun them. And Unable to be Buffed has proven to be one of the best debuffs in the past in PvP as well. If your opponent can't have buffs, there's a very good chance that they're not winning the game. So again, this is a very, very strong S2. It's one of the best in the entire game in my opinion. Cerise's S3 is the aforementioned Froststorm. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagora's. It is an AoE attack with a 1x attack multiplier. It lowers the buff durations of everyone on the enemy team by 1 turn. Then, it has a 75 to 100% chance, depending on Molagora, to apply slow and restrict to everyone on the enemy team for 2 turns. Additionally, it grants Cerise invincibility for 1 turn. And as if this skill already didn't do enough, in her last round of buffs, they made it so that this move will always attack with an advantageous element. If you remember from How to Play Luna, we explained what advantageous element means. You are essentially always attacking from the element that is most advantageous for Cerise. So for example, if you are using this move Froststorm against a light unit, it will attack as if it is from a dark unit. That means you get a boost in critical hit chance and a bit of accuracy. Essentially, this character can no longer miss against green heroes with this move. Before, you used to be able to pick green heroes against Cerise and have a reasonable chance of dodging them. Now, because Froststorm attacks at it with an advantageous element, that is no longer the case.
Sorry, but I have no intention of losing.
I really like that animation. It is super, super cool. This is one of the better crowd control / support skills I feel like in the entire game, because it not only gets rid of buffs, but that slow is really, really huge. And there's very little ways for you to punish Cerise right off the rip, because Froststorm protects her with invincibility, which means she's almost guaranteed to get her second turn. And her second turn is usually going to be a stun on a high priority target, which means that you're basically going to have to wait till this character takes like 2 to 3 turns before you can realistically interact with her in a lot of compositions. So yeah, very, very strong skill. And it is the backbone of not only a couple of opening compositions in PvP, but it is also the main reason why Cerise is seeing a huge uptick in PvE content. As power creep continues to, kind of get out of hand in Epic 7, this character isn't as good in PvP as she used to be, but Froststorm's, overall incredible utility with the slow and restrict and things like that, as well as the dual attack chance that it enables on the S1, has allowed her to carve out a very powerful niche in PvE, a lot of PvE content. She's great in Abyss, she's great in Expeditions, and so on and so forth. So if you're looking for a reason to pick up this character or to build this character, you should be doing it largely for the amazing capabilities of this move and the S1 in PvE content. Cerise's Soul Burn makes it so that Luminous Explosion ignores effect resistance at the cost of 20 souls. We already talked about how powerful this skill is. It's amazing at denying turns, and basically paying 20 souls to guarantee that is amazing. It's so good against high effect resistance characters like your Amelias and your Ruel of Lights and your Elenas and things like that. It allows you to essentially lock down a cleanser potentially, which is one of the big things that Cerise is weak against. It also makes her an incredibly powerful duelist in PvP, because if you have a stockpile of souls at the end of the game and it's just Cerise versus one other character, between the invincibility on the S3, the guaranteed stun on this, and the amount of combat readiness that is just loaded into her kit, you can essentially lock down a character and eke out some wins. So yeah, it's a very powerful soul burn and one of the better ones, I think, in the game. When it comes to Molagora priorities, I think most people are going to want to invest in the S3 Froststorm first for not only the cooldown, but the 100% chance to slow. Slow is incredibly powerful, and I think it's the best part about this actual move, especially from a PvE standpoint. So this is the one I think you invest in first. After that, I think you want to invest in Luminous Explosion to +3 in order to get the -1 turn cooldown. This does have great damage scaling, but Cerise primarily is not a damage dealer, so we really just want to get that -1 turn cooldown so that we can cycle our turns and have her gameplay, her game flow feel a little bit smoother overall. And then after that, I think you want to invest in the S1 to +4 just to get the most amount of combat readiness. This is not a character I would +15. Lately, Cerise has taken a backseat to other characters as the game's premier opener. Ron simply outspeeds her, while Conqueror Lilias provides similar turn 1 lockdown potential and even boasts the same dual attack that she has. With the release of Peta, you're starting to hear more and more people say that Cerise isn't worth pulling and she's not worth building. And to those people, I say, you're wrong. Not every character in Epic 7 needs to be viable in high-end World Arena to be worth the investment. Cerise, if you didn't know, is an absolutely stellar PvE hero and one of the best in the entire game. Her skill set buys you extra turns in Expeditions, locks down adds in Abyss, and really bolsters your team's overall damage thanks to her guaranteed dual attacks. Cerise over the past 6 months has carved herself out a powerful niche, being an absolute monster in not only Pain Pursuer Moroi, but destructive however you pronounce it, that expedition as well. She's also a stellar option for players that are still struggling in Abyss. The guaranteed dual attack, along with the sheer amount of combat readiness that she produces, can really give the DPS for many floors a big boost. Also, when it comes to PvP, it isn't like Cerise is a bad unit all of a sudden. She is still plenty viable as a speed contester in some situations, and is also a viable backup when those heroes like Ran are pre-banned or you fear having your setup characters banned in the post-ban phase. Cerise is a unit that went from being a general use pick, I feel like, to a more specialized pick with these new characters. You really want to be leveraging her now in situations where you're going to be getting tons of value not only from her slow, but the dual attack on her S1 Mystic Arrow. One place you could absolutely still leverage those strengths is in Guild Wars thanks to the smaller team size. Cerise is still an amazing setup hero there and provides big impact thanks to the 50-50 nature of her dual attack. And on top of all of that, did you guys know that Cerise is actually an amazing duelist? Many Guild War games have been won or lost in the past due to a solo Cerise. There's actually a deceptively large part of the cast that can't 1v1 this hero due to the fact that she has invincibility, she has a guaranteed stun, and she has a ton of speed. She can keep many heroes locked down forever, unable to take a turn in those situations. So while many people are saying with the advent of parry that the hero isn't worth pulling or playing, I'm telling you again, I disagree. I think Cerise is still an incredibly strong unit, just with a very defined niche now, and a very defined playstyle that's basically going to be relegated to the one and only speed build that I'm going to show you guys, although I will give you some minor variations depending on what you are trying to accomplish with the hero. So for the actual build, I think you really want to be on speed hit if possible, because this is a debuffer. First and foremost, you really want to have a good effectiveness score on Cerise. And when you consider she doesn't have any base effectiveness, yeah, that really helps, that extra 20%. You really want that. So speed hit is ideal. However, there are a couple of other things I have to point out here in the offset section. First and foremost, I have speed immunity. I have played this in the past just in the off chance that my opponent actually outsped my Cerise. One, immunity is at kind of like an all-time low in how good it actually is, because it just feels like everything nowadays gets rid of immunity. But two, I felt like I had to point it out here because Rimuru exists, and that can really come back to bite you. So while I am listing it here, I just want you guys to be aware that speed immunity comes with a special set of drawbacks that you might not have to deal with if you were on another set. You can play it if you're scared about specific things outspeeding her. But again, I really caution you, just because, again, it doesn't really feel like it does a whole lot right now. And it opens you up to Rimuru as a potential bad matchup. And then I have Speed Any listed here. And that's most likely what a lot of you guys are going to be on, because this character just wants to go fast depending on what you're trying to use her for. And then we'll talk about the speed in a second that I have listed there under the desired stats. But you're going to want this character to go as fast as you could possibly get it without sacrificing too many other stats. And if you are trying to play her as a speed opener in PvP specifically, depending on what tier you're trying to shoot for on Cerise, you're going to want to sacrifice everything for that speed. So it is really important. So now let's get into the desired stats. For attack, I have 1,768 attack. That is, again, Cerise's base attack here with a plus 30 artifact as well as an I-90 weapon. Defense, you want 1,200. That is so we can leverage that decent defense score that she has, and that, she doesn't die in one hit. Like if an Apocalypse Robbie or something just happens to hit her when she's vulnerable, she doesn't just outright die. 12k health is very much the same thing. This is essentially achievable from just wearing a full set of I-90 gear with an I-90 necklace. You'll basically be right at 12k health. So yeah, this is a pretty good number, pretty easy number, I feel like, for many people to hit. For speed, I have 250, which is actually insanely slow for Cerise. So I'm going to put up on the screen now for you where I think you should be speed-wise depending on what you are trying to accomplish. For brand new players, you should try to shoot for 250 if you can get it first and foremost. For people that are only trying to play Cerise in PvE, you want to be around 260 or faster if you can get it. Obviously, higher is better, but 260 is probably the lowest I would go. 260 is probably also where I would go for some of the lower tiers in World Arena. As you start to approach the champion rating, I think you want to be in around 280 or so or faster. And as you get higher up in the higher champion to emperor area, you want to be 290. And then obviously if you are shooting for legend, you want Cerise to be over 300 speed if you can actually get it. For critical hit chance, I have 27% here because I don't really feel like Cerise is a damage dealer. She's more of a support character. But we did just talk about how she's kind of carved herself out this little niche of being an aggressive player, especially in Guild Wars. I have seen in the past Cerise players go for a 100% critical hit chance build so that way they can actually provide meaningful damage in the same way that we talked about Archdemon and how to play Archdemon Shadow. Her having the 100% critical hit chance starts to provide meaningful damage. That extra 50% from the 150% critical hit damage starts to add up. So I can see for some players that being a thing that you actually really want to do. So if you want that, by all means, you can go for that if you've already hit your speed and your bulk goals and things like that. For the effectiveness, I have 100%. That is the lowest that I'm willing to go. If you are willing to pass on the critical hit chance and you already have decent speed and you don't really want to pursue that like 300 like blazing fast speed, like say you're content with 280, you can jack up the effectiveness quite a bit. I personally play around 150 or so. In the build that is on your screen, I think I have like 125, 130. I'd play somewhere in like the 130 to 150 range, I feel like, and that should work for a lot of scenarios. And the ones that it doesn't, you can just use the soul burn to get around it. But if you really care about this character, you really want to push her to the limits, I would try to go for 200. Again, 150 works fine for me, but I am not an aggressive or aggro or like cleave player, so for me, it's a little bit different. If you're somebody that really cares about this character, locking the opponent down on the first turn, again, go higher on the effectiveness. Taking a look at the right side, I am on an HP percentage necklace because it makes getting that 12k HP trivially easy, but there are other options that you can use. Critical hit chance necklace obviously is very, very good if you're trying to go for that 100% crit chance build. The necklace, you can also use anything on it if it has high speed. You'll find that when you are trying to go for a high speed build, it doesn't really matter what the other stats are on the actual necklace, you just care about the speed. For example, my Conqueror Lilius, to hit the speed that she's at, is actually on a defense percentage necklace, even though I really would prefer it to be something else. Again, speed is so rare to come by for a lot of players that you kind of have no choice sometimes in order to just pick whatever. It could be an attack percentage necklace. Whatever you have that gives you high speed, that's going to be what it takes sometimes. So that's why I have any listed here. For the ring, ideally you would like an effectiveness ring. But if you really want a bulky Cerise, somewhere around like 14 or 15k HP, something that survives a bit more, you can go for an HP percentage ring instead if all you care about is having like say 100 effectiveness and you've already gotten that from your other pieces. The other part here, the any, is for the same thing we just talked about with the necklace. Sometimes you just have like a flat attack ring that has 22 speed on it, and that's the amount of speed that you need in order to finish the character to get her in the speed tier that you want her. So in those cases, you might just take a flat ring, a flat attack ring that has 22 speed in order to achieve the goal that you want with the character. For boots, I have speed because that's the most important thing to the character. She's supposed to go fast. She has to leverage all that extra combat readiness in the kit. For the artifact, I have two listed here. Guiding Light is the one that is up on Cerise's banner, so if you've already pulled for her, you probably should have Guiding Light. You should get Guiding Light anyway because it's one of the best ranger artifacts in the entire game. But the other one, which has the exact same stats, is actually the one from the Guilty Gear collab, the one that was on Elfelt's banner, which is Misconfiru, which can be pronounced a number of different ways. The Japanese is Misconfiru, but it can be Misconfile, which is the way the English voice actress pronounces it. But I've also heard Misconfeel, Comfeel, and also Misconfie. So any of those, whichever one you want to use for the pronunciation, that one is really good. And honestly, I think that is actually the best artifact for a PvE series, and in a lot of scenarios, also the best one for PvP. The defense break that it provides on the S1 and S2 when you use it really helps Cerise kind of lean into that aggressive strategy that we talked about, those big boost DPS granting numbers. Those come from the random defense breaks that you get from Misconfile. So I really think you want to be using that artifact, and if not, then obviously I really like Guiding Light as well. The other artifacts that I have listed here are ones that I personally don't really care about or like too much, but you can use them if you want. If you have an extra Deep Sea from Summertime Asaria's banner, that actually has some decent synergy with Cerise. She takes so many turns, she plants so many bombs. It is kind of a fun, gimmicky build that you can play, especially if you're like a Gigaton Whale and just have multiple copies of that artifact, one on Summertime Asaria and one on herself. Obviously, Cerise and that character synergize really well, and I'll talk more about that in the teammate section next. And then Song of Stars is kind of like a bootleg or budget miscon file. If you don't have it, you can use it there as well for the similar reasons that we talked about miscon file. So yeah, those are pretty much the artifacts that I would play on the character. Looking at the per piece average, you want 10% defense per piece, 13 speed if you're trying to get, say, around 260 or so, which is where I expect most people watching this video are trying to go, because you're either trying to build her for PvE or you might be a newer or intermediate player. So around 13 speed is where you want to be to get around the 260-ish mark for the character. And then some amount of effectiveness if you're trying to go for that effectiveness build, and then either some HP percentage or crit chance on the piece, depending on whether or not you're trying to get that 100% crit chance or you're trying to get more bulk and go up to around like 14 or 15k HP. One of the biggest strengths of Cerise is that she works in almost every single composition. She's been used as a speed contester in Standard in the past, a cleave opener, a dedicated control character. So she can really do it all, and she pairs incredibly well with almost every character in the cast. That said, there are a couple of characters that are a bit more synergistic and have a little bit more to bring to the table, and I feel like I should highlight those here. The first one to talk about is obviously going to be Summertime Asaria. This is the main character that you see Cerise paired with in any facet of PvP, because she has a really strong S3 that can essentially trigger the S2 passive of Summertime Asaria right at the start of the game, which can allow you to stun lock the entire enemy team and potentially cleave them before they can do anything. So obviously Summertime Asaria is going to be a very strong pick with Cerise. For PvE players, you really want to be pairing her with characters like Falcon or Clury and Red Cecilia, because they have high valued S1s. Clury's S1 will provide combat readiness to your entire team, and Red Cecilia, will provide you with a defense break on her S1, which can allow you to do a ton of damage to specific expedition bosses. So for tanks, for knights, these I think are the two best ones that synergize with her, at least in PvE. For the rest of the PvP picks, they're just going to end up being characters that have really strong S1s that can synergize with Cerise's dual attack, and those are characters like Arbiter Vildred, Landy, Apocalypse Ravi, or Spectre Tenebria. Cerise used to be a great pick in almost every single scenario, but as time has gone on, other characters have presented themselves and can fill similar niches, and obviously more answers have come out to her, which make her less safe than she used to be. That said, I think where she really shines is against a lot of characters that require combat readiness pushes in order to be effective. So I really think you want to be picking her into those style of heroes. Characters like Closer Charles, General Purgus, Flan, Charlotte, Politis, all of these characters are characters that are only viable because they either provide combat readiness to the team in some function, or they are giving themselves combat readiness in order to fulfill their roles. By restricting those characters, it really cuts off a lot of options for them. So I really think you want to be picking Cerise in these scenarios against these styles of characters. Or if you're not going to pick her against these style of compositions, she's also pretty good against a character that is not green, that you know for sure is most likely not going to be on an immunity set, something that's going to either be on something like a hit set or a penetration set. A perfect example would be a hero like Milam. If you know that you can take turn one and you know that their biggest threat doesn't have immunity, you can use the S2 to just snipe somebody out at the start and basically take over the game from there. For Cerise's bad matchups, you can basically put them into three categories. The first of which is characters that can actually outspeed you and threaten to kill the character right off the bat. Those are characters like Assassin Sid, a damage-based Ron, or even the newest hero that just came out as of recording this video, which is Peira. All of these characters have the ability to essentially either kill or stun Cerise right off the bat, and just make her game impact basically zero, so you should be aware of them. Peira requires a bit more setup because she'll need essentially a book holder in order to guarantee the stun on the S1, and that means that she's foregoing her S3, but she can essentially take your Cerise out of the fight, which is why I felt I would include her here. It's still a little bit too early to tell if she's 100% like a bad matchup, but in theory, she should be a bad matchup. The second category is essentially cleansers. Characters like Elena, Amelia, Rowana on something like Stella Harpa, or Mediator Coeric. These are all reasonably bad matchups for Cerise. Elena, obviously, her S2 Sacred Ground passive will essentially allow her to heal up any damage that you would do from the S3, and her S1 and her Soul Burn will essentially allow you to get rid of any debuffs that Cerise puts down on her team. And then obviously the S3 gives you the effect resistance buff and invincibility, which is obviously very annoying for a lot of the compositions that Cerise is trying to be played in. Amelia is now being played on Bastion of Hope with a bunch of effect resistance in the higher tiers. So she's going to be a pain to debuff, and she has a 2 buff or debuff cleanse on her S3, and that's obviously going to be very bad. Rowana on Stella Harpa might not be super obvious, but every time you end up hitting her with your AoEs, she'll end up cleansing 1 debuff from everybody on the team, which makes it so that Cerise is at half capacity, and whenever you use your S1 dual attack chance, it will end up giving combat readiness and heal everyone on the team. Yes, you do have restrict, but if it does end up getting cleansed, that CR could end up coming back to bite you. And then obviously Mediator Coeric is just incredibly strong. He's very clearly the best cleanser in the entire game. And the last category I wanted to highlight are just some matchups that tend to be kind of bad in certain situations, and those are Rimuru and Violet. If you play Cerise on immunity like I have in the past, then, you know, Rimuru might end up being really, really bad for you, because if your Cerise starts with any buffs at the start of the game, his Analyze and Assess can essentially steal the invincibility from your S3 that you get and basically make it so your team has 0 impact. So I feel like I have to include him for that reason, because there are just sometimes, based on how you have your Cerise built, that things just massively backfire when he's on the field. And then the other character where things can massively backfire is Mr. RNG himself, Green Violet. Obviously, the apple gets rid of any buffs that you might have gotten from the advantageous element on Froststorm. And obviously, since he is green, you can't really interact with him on the S1 or S2. He will always dodge, and he most likely will one-shot you if you do not have something like a skill nullifier or invincibility. So yeah, he's just really bad against, or for, I should say, a lot of the Cerise comps that she's played in general. And that's going to do it for how to play Cerise. Hopefully this video was of some help to you. If it was, you can help me out by considering leaving a like or subscribing to the channel if you are not already. Or more importantly, share it with another friend or guildmate if you think this video will help them out. If you want to see more Epic 7 videos in this style, you should see a playlist on your screen now. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and now if you'll excuse me, I have some lab time to catch up on.